Crowns, the symbol of royalty throughout history the world over. Kings wear crowns, queens wear crowns, emperors wear crowns, and even cartoon characters wear crowns. For thousands of years, leaders in royalty have worn crowns to signify their status and power in society. It is a tradition that has survived up until the present day, with current monarchs wearing them publicly rather often. But whenever you see Korean kings in photos, art, or even modern-day media, why do they never wear crowns? Why did South Korean President Lee Jae-myung gift US President Donald Trump an elaborate gold crown on his state visit? Let's take a look at the history of Korea's history of crowns. Korea's history isn't one continuous monarchy line like the United Kingdom or Japan, but rather many eras of Korean dynasties spanning over many centuries. Modern Korean dynasties can be historically split into the Three Kingdoms period, which consisted of the Silla, Baekje, and Goguryeo. The Goryeo dynasty, which successfully unified the Korean peninsula, and eventually the Joseon dynasty. During Korea's early history, the many kingdoms had unique customs and practices that affected culture, language, and the way society operated. This of course affected the rulers of these kingdoms as well, and as to be expected, the way that these rulers dressed. So the question is, why did none of these rulers wear crowns? Well, the answer is, they did wear crowns. In fact, the history of rulers wearing crowns actually spans about half of what can be considered modern recorded Korean history. The Three Kingdoms each had their own designs of crown, with many examples still surviving today. While all Three Kingdoms' crowns share some similarities, the crowns of Silla are particularly distinct in structure, building materials, and overall appearance, while the Baekje and Goguryeo are more similar in appearance. These crowns survive today because they were found in the tombs of their respective dynasty rulers and give a deep insight into the royal Korean culture of the past. Surviving examples of Baekje crowns are far and few between, with two variations discovered. The first is an ornament-type crown split into two plates that would have been attached to a black silk cap. In 1971, the gold crown ornaments of King Myung of Baekje and what is presumed to be that of the queen were found side by side in his tomb. The crowns were crafted with elaborate flame and flower patterns, which are believed to have been derived from Buddhist tradition and can be seen in many Buddhist sculptures. The second crown that was found much more closely resembles a traditional crown. Crafted from gilt bronze, these crowns were worn by lesser nobles or local chiefs as gifts from the monarchy to keep them under the king's influence. The crowns of Goguryeo differ from the ones of Baekje. Because Goguryeo was located in what is now North Korea, different influences are present in the crowns found there and are much rarer than Baekje and Silla. The presence of feathers is thought to signify class and status, while also being attached to caps, and the traditional crowns that have been found also reflect Buddhist influences much like those of Baekje. While this period is known as the Three Kingdoms in Korean history, there was actually an additional smaller kingdom located at the bottom of the Korean peninsula. Gaya was not ruled by a single king, but rather each city-state had its own rulers with their own crowns that have since been found in tombs of nobles and aristocrats. Now, perhaps the most famous and representative of the ancient Korean crowns are that of the Silla dynasty. This is the crown replica we all saw South Korean President Lee Jae-myung give to US President Donald Trump during his state visit. If you have ever seen a depiction of the traditional Korean crown, this is what you would have seen. Tall, intricately decorated, and made of glimmering gold. Unlike the traditional crowns from Western civilizations, these were not decorated in precious stones like diamonds or rubies, but rather a representative mineral in East Asian culture, jade. Thin gold plates were hammered into intricate shapes like trees or antlers, which were thought to mean mediators between heaven and earth. Silla was known as the country of gold, which may reflect its grandeur and abundance of gold in their crowns and jewelry. To date, a total of 6 gold Silla-era crowns have been found in various tombs around Gyeongju, South Korea. After the fall of unified Silla and the rise of the Goryeo dynasty, these types of crowns completely disappear from the Korean historical record. In popular dramas or movies depicting the Goryeo or Joseon dynasties, you may see this type of headwear on the kings of Korea. There is a very specific reason why this happened. With the establishment of Goryeo, King Taejo approached his kingdom with far more rigid Confucian ideas. Ideas of self-control, legitimacy, and ethical authority led to a far more scaled-down sense of lavishness and greatly affected the way society dressed. In addition, just north of Goryeo, China was the undisputed hegemonic power, and the Emperor of China was the most spiritually elevated person in the region. King Taejo wished to establish legitimacy for his kingdom by taking much influence from the court dress of the emperor. These crowns became less a symbol of divine power and more a symbol of the office of the monarch. This is reflected in the adopted Goryeo Myung, which is similar to that of the Chinese emperor's crown, except it has fewer bead strings dropping from the brim. This is to symbolize Goryeo's acknowledgement of China's imperial authority and keeping in line with Confucian ideology. During the Goryeo dynasty, it was worn for many major rituals and ceremonies, and its role was a mixture of both ritual and political roots. After the transition from the Goryeo to the Joseon dynasties, the appearance and the meaning behind the Myung also changed. As from Silla to Goryeo, this change in dynasties also had a profound impact on what ideology played the biggest role in society. Joseon moved away from many Buddhist influences to that of much stricter Confucian ones, leading to the exclusion of Buddhist influences on the actual regalia. This wave of Neo-Confucianism meant even more minimalism and stricter codes on what it could look like, in a rule called 경국대전. Very little personal or stylistic changes could be made to the accepted appearance of the crown. The appearance once again was minimalized even more to reflect the seriousness of the king, as well as how often the Myung was worn. Now only worn for ancestral rites and for even fewer ceremonies than during Goryeo. Much more attention was paid to the number of beads on the actual Myung, as to not blur the line between the cosmic roles of emperor and king, as to not offend the Chinese emperor. In the spirit of Confucianism and minimalism, the Korean king wore an ikseongwan during most of his daily court routines. It was made of cloth that was stiffened with lacquer or horsehair and had two wings protruding from the side. The rank of the wearer was reflected by the size of these wings, with the king's ikseongwan having the largest with varying sizes for various court officials. These are typically the headwear that is shown in Korean historical media that take place during the Joseon dynasty. This would change again when Joseon was abolished and the Korean Empire was established. When King Gojong became emperor of the Korean Empire, his status in the cosmic sense was elevated to that of equals with the emperors of Qing and Japan. His Myung reflected this as well. Given the equal status of rank, Emperor Gojong's Myung went from 9 bead strings in the front and back during Joseon to 12 bead strings during the Korean Empire. This showed that Korea was no longer a tributary state to Qing and that it ruled itself as the highest power. In practice, however, this did not last long, as the Korean Empire was dissolved after only 13 years, as the entire empire was absorbed by Japan, and this culture of crowns died. Despite this, the crown prince of the Yi dynasty of Joseon, Yi-won, continues to don the 12 bead string Myung of the Korean Empire at the annual Jongmyo-je래, where the elaborate ancestral rites are performed for all of the previous Joseon kings in Seoul. This is the only time where it is worn in the modern day, keeping the tradition alive. Looking back, Korea truly had a unique history with crowns worn by royalty. Confucian ideals took the once gilded and golden crowns of Silla to simple material with more symbolic meanings during the Goryeo and Joseon dynasties. The gold crowns of Silla certainly portray elegance, wealth, and class in a much more tangible way, which is why they have become the representative crown in Korean history that still lives on today.